Hi, good morning, everyone, and nice to meet you all. Um, I'm Jacqui, and I am a freelancer working in the arts, heritage, and health arena. I was just explaining to Hannah that my background's actually in theatre, mainly working in London at off West End and some West End and festivals and all sorts of things. So when we moved out of London to here on the borders of Hertfordshire and Buckinghamshire, I thought, what can I do that doesn't mean I'm traveling into London and where I can connect with the local community and engage with the natural surroundings. So it was a sort of pooling of pooling of the skills, and I did a load of work with Chiltern music therapy to start with, which got me into the health side of using something that's got an artistic base, although music therapy is used for its scientific effects. And then I ended up having a chat with Chiltern Open Air Museum, which is just a short drive away down the lanes, after having a family event in one of the barns, and I fell in love with the place. Um, don't know who knows Chiltern Air Museum, but for a quick summary, it kicked off at the end of the 70s. It's on a 45-acre site, has 37 rescued buildings that otherwise would have been destroyed that were moved to the site and then rebuilt using the traditional methods to keep those skills alive and to keep the stories of the people that lived and their lifestyles going. So I work as a sort of freelance outreach manager there on a project by project basis. And the first project that I started working on is called Accompanied Walks. And that very much came out of the pandemic. There was a little pot of money to do something in the area of social prescribing. Just in case people aren't familiar with that term, social prescribing, in its shortest explanation, would be, I suppose, a non clinical intervention to support somebody's health and well-being. So we had this pot of money before the pandemic to do something maybe with a group of people, but that wasn't possible, and neither could we get into the buildings. But we were fortunate that in July 2020, the site was able to open and the public could come back on to the grounds and the gardens and the woodland and so forth. So I'm now going to get this PowerPoint up. Hope that comes up. There we go. Okay, so I've used the brand colours of the blue and the green, but we were very lucky to get an award a year ago. Unfortunately, the pink's a bit of a clash, but it's on there anyway. So I thought, what can we do where we just use the grounds that will really support people to get out and about? Because I suppose social isolation was one of the big things that was hitting people and then exacerbated by the pandemic. Don't know about you a lot, but I did a lot more walking during the pandemic than I do normally. And it was the one thing that we could do to see our friends and family on a 2-by-2 basis and get away from the teenagers. So accompanied walks is what we kicked off with in 2020 during the pandemic. And we asked the funders if we could use the money for the original project for this. And we ran a 2-month pilot in September and October of 2020, where we made use of the museum grounds. And it was basically, why should we go out and walk and meet people? And it was a case of using the advantages of having what we call a dose of vitamin green, being out and about, which comes into all of your work, and having a social interaction. So it worked very simply. There was I'm just going to go on to how it sort of worked. We had a registration process. So there was a form to fill with quite a few nosy questions, which people could use themselves as a self-referral, or it could be through a healthcare professional, particularly social prescribers, who are the link workers that often sit within GP surgeries. Might have, let's think of a typical example, somebody has depression. They're a regular visitor to the doctor. They go, once a month or more. They sometimes call out emergency services. Cost the NHS an awful lot of money, medication, health professionals' time, etc., etc. But there's something else that might be a more beneficial intervention. So the doctor might then say to this patient, have a chat with our social prescriber. The social prescriber will then get to know that patient, find out what they're interested in, and suggest an activity that might be a helpful intervention. With Chiltern music therapy that I mentioned earlier, there are lots of singing groups that are run that really help people with conditions like anxiety, and the things that come out of loneliness, depression, and people that maybe are caring for somebody and therefore stuck at home a lot, maybe somebody with dementia or Parkinson's. And by taking part in some of these activities, it's something that these people can share as well with the person they're caring for. So we got the word out, like you might for an event, a bit of marketing. Once we got the forms, I'd have a chat with either the referrer or the person that had been referred, get to know them a little bit, answer any questions that they would have, fix a date and a time. And I had recruited a team of volunteers from the museum to be the accompanists to these walks. And the volunteers I chose were particularly friendly and compassionate, and easy people to be alongside. I would try and match the person's interest to the volunteer's life experience, without trying to sound like as a dating agency. But just a few touch points would often help. So once we'd fixed the date, the person would rock up to the museum either with a companion or a friend or on their own, or with a dog if they wanted to bring their dog if they had one. And I'd introduce them to the volunteer, and they'd have a sort of VIP tour, very much customized at their own pace, 45 minutes to 60 minutes, and then a chance to sit down with the volunteer and me and have a cup of tea and a biscuit. And that just gave more opportunity for having a chat. People were then asked if they wanted to come back again. I usually give them a few days, bit of a questionnaire to feed back on as well. I mentioned that the benefit of a walk would be a dose of what I call a dose of vitamin green. It's a safe place to be. They're in a supervised setting with clean and attended toilets, or quite clean. I don't know if you've been to Coam recently, a few heritage cobwebs about. And yes, that very important social interaction. Benefits to us, these ladies in this picture brought along some samosas, and Neil, the volunteer there, and I enjoyed those very much. So there was an exchange of benefits. And what we found through the feedback was that there was an increase of confidence and manage existing health conditions. People who hadn't been out much, particularly during the pandemic, and we found this more the following year when people are able to get out and about a bit more confidence to go to the shops on their own, more confidence to chat with a neighbour, and that grew and grew for people, and their lives got bigger and more outward looking again. So the project evolution, as I mentioned, we started in September, October 2020, just using the museum grounds. And then the following year, once the buildings were open, we were able to offer walks for the whole year. And we mainly targeted over 65s and socially isolated people. During that year, a couple of families who didn't fit that profile came in, and they were mainly mothers supporting young adults with autism. So in 2022, we broadened the profile of the people that could come and join us, and offered to young autistic adults, had a bit of extra funding for that. And then this year, it's been broader still, with people with any additional need that we feel we can support refugees who are new to the area, and also people who have been recently bereaved. Now, for some of these groups, to help with our understanding and also the confidence of being alongside, we had some training. So that's been useful for the whole organisation and just general life skills as well. So on this slide, I've put sort of what's next. So we've created this intervention. It's been running now for a few years, and it's very much embedded in part of the museum's offer. Part of what next for some individuals is that they became volunteers for the museum. So we're looking at this sort of continual pathway rather than offering people a few accompanied walks at the museum. But then it's a bit like taking a child's toy away and they're left standing there. What next? So yes, some people have become volunteers, which has been an amazing outcome. And for some people, they've come back for a more in-depth project, which we've called Summer Wellbeing Socials. That ran for 2 months over this past summer, where the same group of people came and did a different workshop each week, and they got more than a boring biscuit, a bit more of a tea. And in fact, just writing up the report for that with really pleasing outcomes. A couple more people became volunteers at the museum, and the group who were previously socially isolated individuals have now formed a WhatsApp group, and they meet independently for coffees and chats. And I was also able to squirrel a little bit of the budget to provide everybody with an annual pass for COAM so that they can come and visit whenever they want to meet there over the next year. Few facts and figures. We've had about 162 walks so far. About over 300 walkers have been along and about 10 dogs. I have a team of about 10 volunteers working with me. And for 70% of our visitors, this was their first visit to the museum. So in a way, it also acts as an audience development project too. Here's a list of some of the conditions of the people that either were referred to us or self-referred. Lovely couple here. The chap there has quite acute dementia, very stressful and hard for his wife, but they found some respite coming to the museum. At one point, volunteer here, Kevin took our visitor off to the loo, and on walking back, apparently our visitor said to Kevin, "Oh, I like the look of that lady over there." And that was his wife of many years, which was rather sweet, I thought. Lots of feedback, as I said, gathered through a questionnaire. I'll just leave that on there for you to read rather than read it out to you. So that relates to increasing confidence. We've had an increase in the number of groups. This is one of our younger groups from a local school. They're at a mainstream school supported by the SEND team. Here they'd all crammed themselves into the privy at our toll house, which I thought was quite a cute picture. They were great fun to be around as well. And as the staff member says, it was really good to observe them in a non-school setting. We have had visits from people in care homes along with their members of staff. We have a golf buggy for people that either that have limited mobility and can walk a bit, or would rather just come in the golf buggy and for the main drag of the museum, so they can then use their energy to walk to and from some of the buildings around the village green, which is the sort of epicenter of the museum. Another couple here, one caring for the other with dementia, but he did remember that he was one of 22 siblings. which I thought was extraordinary. Apparently, his mother just used to count the number of feet to make sure everybody was present. Younger people interacting with the animals, so would find out what people were particularly interested in, whether it was the buildings, the gardens, the livestock, or maybe they just wanted to sit on a bench and watch the world go by. Very much customized to the particular mood at that time of the visitor. Here's somebody in the golf buggy, so she got to see a lot more of the museum than she would do otherwise. And here's something from our social prescribers, who they themselves have fallen in love with the museum and will find an excuse to bring patients themselves to get away from their desks and de-stress. So they're telling the world. Bonus points for our organisation. Mention that some of the people that have been on walks or our other social prescribing project have become volunteers. Some people have given donations. This was a free of charge opportunity, but people who were able and felt that they wanted to say thank you in a different way have given us some donations. Some people who are maybe not the primary visitor or patient, but a supporting person might be involved with another organisation, and they were inspired by the place to then organise a group booking. So that was income for the organisation, additional revenue for catering and retail. I mentioned earlier a little bit of audience development, and then lots of learning opportunities for all of us as individuals and an organisation as well. There are my details. On there. The other thing that came out of this, not just the second social prescribing project, but I was asked by Buckinghamshire Culture, which is a tiny organisation set up to promote arts and culture and heritage in Buckinghamshire. They wanted to pilot a social prescribing project to see whether more organisations could support people in the community by offering bespoke projects. So I ran a training day at COAM, bringing in 10 other organisations. And from that, there's the summer socials that I organised at COAM and 4 other projects that I'm now mentoring around the country. So we have a toolkit for that, sort of step-by-step. I suppose it's a bit like project management. These are the things you need to consider if you're going to set up a social prescribing project. And then various forms and materials. So if anybody's interested in talking about any of that, then do get in touch. So that is the end of the Death by PowerPoint bit. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you, that's been done. And I hope that made sense. Didn't race through it too quickly. And if anybody's got any thoughts or questions, fire away.
I kick off and just thank you, Jacqui, for fascinating insight into the work that you're doing at COAM. I love the idea of a dose of vitamin green. I think that's really kind of captures that opportunity of exploring those sort of the often hidden benefits of walking and just meeting and making connections as well in such a wonderful setting. I was interested in the sort of social prescribers and the local workers that you kind of worked with, and kind of how much of a benefit that was to kind of really make those connections. I guess they can be kind of gatekeepers to kind of open up and really work with the people that you're trying to reach, and how important that was, other than your own marketing and publicity.
Yeah, it's actually quite a tricky one. Social prescribers and what they do really varies in different areas, and what they're into as individuals, what they can understand, what inspires them, I suppose. So the offer that we have at Chiltern Open Air Museum is quite an easy one to get your head around. Most of us know that if we go out for a walk, we feel better. One of the projects under the wider Buckinghamshire Social Prescribing Project pilot project is around shared reading, and it's at Hewingdon, which is a National Trust property. And the social prescribers, who actually are the same people that work in my local area, just they're not interested in it. They don't really get it, and they feel there's too much of a barrier for their patients to actually want to prescribe shared reading to them. And actually, it's a lovely, beautiful setting, very safe, very comfortable environment. But until they try it themselves, they won't know. So what I have advised everybody is that you try and get your social prescribers to come on site and experience it for themselves. And I certainly did that with accompanied walks. I've had quite a lot of social prescribers coming from probably a 30-mile radius to come and visit, so they really understand and they know who to refer to. The role of social prescribers has changed as well, and the personnel changed. So you're constantly trying to keep those contacts up and going, and then finding other people. So some organizations and other charities might have somebody that fulfills that role within them. So it's worth picking up with, depending on your target, whether it's the local Age UK or Alzheimer's Society, and other people who are working with the people that you're trying to support. Does that answer your question, Hannah? Yeah.
Can I jump in and ask you something, Jacqui?
Yes, of course.
I'm unfamiliar with how social prescribing works. I mean, I'm familiar with it as a concept, and I know of lots of examples that intersect with museum practice. But does this vary enormously across the country in terms of how these things are structured and how you find out who's socially prescribing and who's not? And I mean, are there sort of standard formal central?
No, that's a really, really good question. Some areas will have a directory, and then it's up to the service providers to make sure you've put the data in there. But then it also means that the social prescribers need to know where to look.
And where there are those directories, is that local authorities that run those, or
often local authorities? Yeah. I've relied on social media as much as anything else, but also just direct contact with the social prescribers in the areas that I'm working with, or people that I feel can get to us. But it's quite hard work to make those connections. And then you find that what you're offering doesn't fit the priorities of what the social prescribers are dealing with. Last winter, they were dealing with warm spaces. More recently, it's been referring people to food banks. And then sometimes you find social prescribers are told, don't spend more than 10 minutes with each patient, and actually just do that on the phone and no face-to-face meetings. So they don't even get to know their patients well enough to then know that what you're offering, even if they do know about it, is the right thing for them. So it really, really varies on the directories that are available and who knows about them. And then the priorities in those micro regions and areas. There's another organization called ESOP, and they've tried to get a directory going of all arts and health offers.
is that spelled ESOP as in the fables?
Fables, yeah. I think it's called
I'll Google
ESOP
that
Health.
and find lots about fables.
Yeah. So they have a directory. I can dig it up and send it to you, Hannah, and then that can be shared with the network. But yeah, it really, really varies, but it's a lot of kind of grassroots graft to make those connections and get to know your social prescribers, but it's worth putting in the effort.
And if I can ask a sort of follow-up question, are there many GP surgeries that are socially prescribing, or is that something that people are talking about but hasn't quite taken off yet? Or
no, there are certainly around Buckinghamshire and Hertfordshire. There are an awful lot, and then various organisations. Gloucestershire was actually one of the very early areas to start this, and there was a GP, I can't remember his name now, I think it was about 2004, he set up an art activity in the surgery waiting room. And that was the early genesis of something formal coming out of this. We've all been socially prescribing forever. You know, how old is it for singing lullabies to babies to get them to sleep? Yeah, it's new terms, new labels, and new structures, but actually, social prescribing has been going on for millennium.
Thank you. It's brilliant.
Any other thoughts or questions or ideas that you've got to put something in place at your own organizations, or if you're already doing something that fits this sort of model?
I actually had a part of a question and part of a comment. In the States, they have activity managers that work in a lot of nursing homes and assisted living facilities. So I wondered if that's part of also the folks that you reach out to, or if that's like a separate group tour.
No, you're absolutely right, Deborah. That is, I do interact quite a lot with the activity managers and coordinators, and invite them. And they've brought groups to the museum for sure. They're also the people that we might go to with something. And in fact, I started making contact during the pandemic. Some films had been made of some of the buildings in the museum at COAM, and I made some little quizzes to go with that as a sort of interaction or as a conversation starter, and sent those out to about 40 care homes in the area. And that's when I started making contact with the activity managers. So yes, they're key people to build contacts up if you'd like to work with those constituents.
And then I wondered if there's any, or do the folks that you do reach in these individualized contexts come back? And can they come on their own?
It really depends on their capacity. So some people do come back, or they'll come back with family members if they are in contact with them. A lot of the people we have are really socially isolated or isolated from their families for some reason or another. But those people that do have capacity from a financial point of view to buy a ticket, or a mobility and general cognitive capacity, yes, they do come back. But often, because we are targeting people that don't have those capacities, then no, it's only if they are supported in some way that they come back.
Great, thank you.
I can heartily recommend wandering around the grounds of the Chiltern Open Air Museum. I did it some years ago with Deb, in fact. Ruined only by the presence of my noisy children.
Did you have to buy them ice creams?
God, let me remember. It's too long ago. It was back when Sue Shave was still director. So
oh yes,
a good while ago.
There was
I think I interrupted a legitimate question there with my mild reminiscence.
Oh, there was a medieval feast going on.
Peter, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Do you think that it's the fact that yours is an open air museum which is significant in your success? You know, the open air nature of it as opposed to an enclosed museum. Do you think that's an important factor?
I think it's been an important part of this particular model, yes. However, I don't think it's a limiting factor to running projects in buildings. So it depends what you're targeting. So Amersham Museum is another museum offering something under the pilot with Buckinghamshire culture, and that's around reminiscence. Lots of museums will do something based around art, or use the space for a singing group, or anything that fits in with what the museum is about. It's raison d'etre. I mean, sometimes you just want to use it because it's a nice space to be in. That's fine. But if you can link it to the reason the museum is there and what it's about, even better. But you can be super creative. Just have to sort of think tangentially to see what you can offer and what the skill set is within your organization.
Thank you. Thank you.
I had my hand up just because I was going
Oh,
to
you
say
have?
I have
Hello,
I have,
Ollie, again.
I have my colleague Philippa runs sessions with a local, or has been running sessions with a local group who work with adults with early onset dementia, and we don't have an open air museum site, so a lot of that work is focused on objects or on reminiscence around photographs or other kind of approaches to that kind of work. And we also have a lot of work in our garden, so it's not as extensive a space as Chiltern Open Air Museum, but I mean, there's a little bit of outdoor space there.
You absolutely don't need a lot of space to do something under the social prescribing umbrella at all. There is that whole sort of green movement for using outdoor spaces because of those additional benefits of being out and about. But so much can happen within a closed space too. Not a limiting factor, just different.
Could I ask you a question about your volunteers?
Yes, of course.
Were there existing volunteers within the organisation, or did you recruit specifically for this project? And what kind of training were they given in terms of the special needs of the people that you were working with?
Yes, they were all existing volunteers, although a couple have joined since who weren't volunteers at the time, but they knew about the project. But most of the volunteers I work with also work within other teams at the museum, maybe the buildings team or the gardens team or their stewards. And then they dip into this project. In terms of training, first of all, there's a good briefing of what to do, what not to do, expectations, boundaries. What happens if somebody makes a disclosure during a walk? Certainly, I ask the volunteers not to give advice. Worth mentioning that none of us are DBS checked at present. So anybody that's considered vulnerable or is a minor has to come with somebody else. That's quite key. In terms of specific training, when we decided that we wanted to work specifically with autistic people, I had an ex-colleague from Chiltern Music Therapy come in who does a training on autism awareness, and that was fab. She is autistic herself, so has real life experience to communicate to us and really open about her experience and answering any questions that we had. So that was really helpful. As I said earlier, it really helps with people's confidence to be alongside people if they have not had much exposure to autism directly themselves. Similarly, this year we wanted to work more with bereaved people. So I had somebody come in from a local hospice who runs a training on being alongside bereaved and compassionate communication. So once you know who you might be working with, it's good to have those specific trainings. I also do a bit of buddying. So if with new volunteers, so if anybody's joining the team, I'll make sure that they come along for a walk or two with somebody that's already working, who's already been doing a few walks. So again, they become familiar. Worth mentioning, and I can see somebody's just popped one organisation in the chat. Yes, the Social Prescribing Academy. There are a couple of national social prescribing organisations, the Social Prescribing Network, and so acronym is NASP. And what's the one we got the award from? Where's that? Right at the beginning. I'll just have a quick, having a moment. National Prescribing Network. So yes, there are a few central organisations that have a wealth of information on their websites, case studies, directories, and so forth.
Jacqui, can I ask if you do you tend to in the nicest possible way divide your audiences to tailor those walks accordingly? So if you are working with those who've suffered bereavement, are you then also having walks which involve other members of other communities and other?
Yeah, it really is. It just whoever refers.
Turns up. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. The telephone conversation in advance of them coming is quite important. I've weeded out people that were just looking for an opportunity not to pay to come in, for example, and take advantage of the funding. And I have very diplomatically said, oh, you sound fabulous. Maybe you can come independently. So that qualifying call is really, really helpful. But it also helps those that really are needy and anxious. And this would be for any activity that you're running, that they've already had a nice chat with somebody, so that when they do arrive, there's somebody they sort of know or have had some contact with already. And that continuity, I think, has been quite important to some people. Oh, thanks, Ollie. You found ESOP there.
I hope that's the right one.
Yes, it is.
I'm going to pass details on to my colleague Philippa, because I'm sure she'll be interested. And I can see that Kate, our director, has been sharing details of some of our work.
Fantastic. I'll look at those. Hi, Kirsty.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, actually, this year I've had some success with taking our museum, the Museum of Dartmoor Life. I've been doing walks actually out on Dartmoor to get new audiences, really, and had completely, well, all the people that came on my walks, none of them had ever been to the museum. But they were just general public, I just opened it to the general public. I'm wondering if that's something that I could perhaps turn into a social prescribing venture. And I was wondering about things like, if I did that, insurance and stuff like that. Is there advice on, I mean, you're obviously within the grounds of your own place. I'd be taking people outside of the museum. So would that be a problem with these systems, these networks?
Although the museum obviously has all the insurances and public liability, I've taken that out as an individual as well, because I freelance just to make sure I'm completely covered. And that actually happened when I nearly ran somebody over with a mobility scooter when I was just checking the key was in properly. Yeah, it happens. So I would take advice on that. But yes, I would have thought if you either spoke to the museum's insurers to say, would I be covered if this is under the museum umbrella? And if not, you might want to take out your own. And it could certainly work under the social prescribing umbrella. So I think the national organisation is Walks for Health, which came into the Ramblers Association, or the Ramblers as it's called now. Later this week, I'm going to meet with a woman that runs Simply Walks for Buckinghamshire Council. So she's very interested in linking up more with social prescribers, and she runs, there's so many different walks in Buckinghamshire that come under her umbrella, but she's looking to expand those into social prescribing. So yes, I think, again, it's just another activity that people can be signposted to in its most simplistic terms. What I would watch out for, and if I was you, was whether those people are independent or not. And if they're not, that they need to come with somebody, and that you know enough about their needs, just so that you're briefed and you can respond to those, or you can say, I'm sorry, this isn't suitable for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the downfall of walking on Dartmoor. It is not, accessible for all, unless they happen to have their own trampers and things. If they're not physically able, then that could be, we could do something around that. But of course, those are extremely expensive, and unless you're the National Trust, you may not have one.
True. Yeah. So again, it's having that, asking nosy questions, and you're justified in asking those because you want to make sure people are safe and comfortable.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, and a really interesting project that you've done.
Thank you. No, it's been fun. It's very rewarding as well. Deborah.
So we at the Henry Ford have it's a huge thing. And we have a diversity, equity, access, inclusion person who has been working with state organizations that support access. One of the things that they've devised, and I'd love to hear if you've taken this route, are sensory friendly events that precede a major event. So there's usually a corporate sponsor, and it's put out to the staff of whatever the corporate sponsor is. And they have about an hour and a half before any major event. And it seems to be a really intense extra production, but it's very different from the individualized kinds of access you've provided. But I just wondered if Chiltern has thought about that in any way.
We haven't, to the best of my knowledge, ever done anything on the model you've just described as having something in advance of the main event. What we are doing now is putting more in place for people with access needs. So, for example, if there is an event where people need to see through what could be a crowd, we had medieval jousting recently, and a spot was reserved for people, mainly wheelchair users, so that it was lower down and they could still see, but also having seated spaces, and then set away from the crowd, a quiet spot for people that might be triggered by noisy things and crowds and so forth, mainly autistic people. We're getting more provision in so more people can be comfortable and catered for at our events, but we haven't done anything as a pre-access event. But I think that's a really good idea, and I'd like to steal it.
I'll send you the name of the woman who manages that. She's fantastic.
Great. Sounds wonderful. Deborah, is social prescribing a thing where you are?
I don't know enough to know. It's formalized, I think, in a different way, but the notion of like reaching out to these individual groups or small family units or personal caregivers, we don't do that. And I think it may just be a scale thing for us.
Yeah, there's a lot to do with scale, and what I've discovered through doing the wider project in Buckinghamshire in the county is that most organizations don't have the existing capacity. It needs to be separately fundraised for, and maybe somebody else needs to come in and run it and do it, because it's one or two people running the organizations, which I gather is the case with many. So it is an add-on.
Just found the blog that Caroline Braden did, so I'll put this in the chat. And this is from a few years old, but it's a COVID era message about what the Henry Ford tried to do then. So that's 4 years ago. A lot has grown and been sustained. But one of our biggest sensory friendly opportunities for the public is the Halloween, which is starting here on the 5th of October for 18 nights. And because it's so overly stimulating, they bring in, often Ford Motor Company sponsors it. And so staff can bring their mobility hindered or dementia. Yeah, folks of a variety of with a variety of needs can come early.
Interestingly, Deb, I was just picking up on that question of whether social prescribing is a thing in the States. I found I just quickly Googled it, and there's an organization, I'll bung them in the chat, who are making it their mission to have social prescribing available to every American by 2035, which seems terribly ambitious to me. But,
wow.
But it may be something that you can pick up on in Alfam, or maybe we should do something more broadly with IEMA as well.
Oh yeah. That both sound excellent. And here's Caroline's. Caroline is grown up with Alfam, really, and is very active in, you know, state and national accessibility, cultural accessibility efforts. So she's the person who would know. And thanks for that. I'll pass that link on to her. And
I can't vouch for that organization. It's just simply one I've Googled just now.
yeah, no, she will vet it, or probably already has, but I don't know if this recording would be available to her if I could share it when we're done.
I'm sure we can find a way of making it available, can't we, with Jacqui's permission and
Yes, of course.
yeah,
Hannah's expertise.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I'll
you.
go out on the network if Jacqui's happy with that, and then obviously Deborah, please do forward it on. I love how these things just snowball and escalate and go off in different directions. So it's lovely to see it having such an effect on conversations today, and potential links to Alfam and AEMO as well, and other ways that we can continue this discussion. I don't know if anyone else had any other queries for Jacqui while we have her on the call.
Just to say thank you, that was really interesting. And I think, yeah, Jacqui, I might try to put you in touch with my colleague Philippa at the Merrill.
Yeah, of course.
You could share experiences. It might be an interesting thing to draw into a future Rural Museums Network seminar or something.
Thank you. I'd like that.
Thank you, Ollie. And I'll end with a bit of a shameless plug for some upcoming events that we've got for the Rural Museums Network. So next week, in fact, the first of our autumn seminars begins. We will be exploring the practicalities, or perhaps the impracticalities, of commercial opportunities from our collections, with the wonderfully named "I'm an archivist, not a merchandiser." So please do join us on Thursday, the 5th of October, on Zoom. The links are all up our website, and that will be preceded at 2:45 form with our Royal Museums Network AGM as well. But a very quick, about 10 minutes or so, and then at 3 o'clock the main event for that. And I'm delighted we're also joined today by Peter Roper, who will be joining us in November's Chewing the Cud session. So we'll be in touch obviously with a lot more information on that. Off the top of my head, I think it's the 21st of November, Peter, talking about Express Dairies and the archives and the amazing ephemera collection that you've been creating, cataloguing, and sharing. So please do join us for those, but we'll be in touch with October dates as well for Chewing the Cud. And a huge thank you again for Jacqui for your time this morning, for inspiring such a fascinating discussion and links sharing and the like. It's been real food for thought. So thank you all, and without further ado, we'll let you continue the rest of your mornings, but thank you ever so much.
Bye-bye. Lovely to meet you all.
Bye.